In this video, we're going to talk about enforcing user connection limits in Postgres. If there is a busy and critical production system hosting multiple services and there are a ton of users, database users, you might want to enforce connection limits. Otherwise, what is going to happen is one user is going to use up a lot of connections and then use a lot of resources. Remember that in Postgres, each connection gets its own private memory, and when there is sudden and unusual activity from one user, it can use up a lot of resources and cause unwanted issues. So when you create a role, you can enforce a connection limit. For example, you want to enforce the limit as 5 connections. You can do that at role creation time. And once that 5 connection limit is hit, it will throw an error for that user. But there is one gotcha you need to remember. Let's say there is a user with super user privilege or super user attribute. Any connection limit you add for that user will not be enforced. So let's say you create a super user with a 10 connection limit. It won't be enforced for super users, but for other users, it will be enforced. That is one gotcha you need to remember. We're going to showcase that in the demo. In this scenario, we're going to create a user with a limit of 5 connections and see what's going to happen when he tries for the 6th or 7th connection. To begin with, let us go ahead and create a user. Here, I'm going to change it to app read user. Of course, you're going to use complex passwords in production. This is just for test. App read. And I will remove super user. Currently, there is some kind of syntax issue. Now it got created. We created a user called app read user with a limit of 5 connections. Now, let us try to run a PG bench. PG bench. To run for 30 seconds. I'll give 4 client connections. I'll try and use app read user. Looks like that connection doesn't have the privileges. Let me go ahead and grant the privileges for that user. So now we give privileges to that user. Hopefully our PG bench will work now. Now it is running for 30 seconds. Let us wait until this completes. And the important thing to remember is we give client connections as 4, and the connection limit we are enforcing for this user is 5. So it shouldn't error out, and it should complete successfully. Let us wait for 30 seconds. And now it is done. As you can see, the duration was 30 seconds and it was successful. Now what we're going to do is we're going to increase it to 7 and see what will happen. As you can see, it returned this error, fatal too many connections for role app read user. So this is a good feature in production, especially if it is a critical environment and you have a lot of roles and you want to enforce a limit, connection limit. There are several reasons to enforce connection limit, because in Postgres each connection comes with an overhead because of the memory, the private memory it gets. Also, you want to limit the number of connections by role when there are multiple services. For example, you have microservice based architecture and there are multiple services co-hosted, and you don't want one service to cause issues to other services. So also for security, if you want to throttle the number of connections per user, this is a very good feature to be used. So evaluate your existing roles in production, and if needed, please enable the connection limits. Now we've seen the good feature wherein the application got an error when it tries to add more connections. Let's see what happens when it is super user, right? So if you see, the user we created earlier was not super user, just a normal regular user. So what I'm going to do now is alter role app read user super user. So now we added the super user attribute, and you see the app read user is a super user now, and it has a limit of 5 connections. And let's go ahead and run the same test now. Now as you can see, it is running fine. Although the connections is 7, it is not throwing out any error because it is a super user. Although it had 5 connection limit, it is allowing more than 5, which is an important gotcha. So if you are giving super user and you are enforcing connection limits, sometimes it may not work, and you need to check properly your use case and use this feature accordingly.